What starts as analysis ends in absurdity when Richie Incognito paints the Browns' front office like a Madden simulation gone off the rails. His mockery of their draft process, likening it to spinning a wheel, turns serious criticism into full-blown satire. By the time he's describing Cleveland's war room as a daycare center with Wi-Fi, the point is crystal clear. The dysfunction has become laughable. Yet beneath the jokes is a brutal honesty about a franchise that consistently chooses uncertainty over common sense.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Spotlighting Dillon Gabriel's selection as the latest misfire. Incognito's comedic teardown is more than a roast. It's a reflection of how fans now engage with failure as entertainment. The Browns have become a meme, a punchline, a lesson in how not to run a football team. In highlighting the humor of their chaos, Incognito underscores a darker reality. The decisions may be funny, but the consequences are real, and they keep dragging Cleveland deeper into irrelevance. Richie Incognito has officially gone scorched earth on the Cleveland Browns, and honestly, it might be the most brutal and accurate takedown of the franchise in recent memory. In what can only be described as a passionate football exorcism, Incognito ripped the Browns apart over their decision to keep Dillon Gabriel as their quarterback, bypassing what many saw as a far more promising and high-ceiling talent in Shedeur Sanders. And this wasn't just a hot take. This was a full-on demolition job of the Browns' entire approach to football, from scouting to coaching to the very culture of the organization. From the moment he opened his mouth, it was clear Richie wasn't there to sugarcoat anything. He slammed the team's decision-making as reckless, confusing, and out of sync with the rest of the league. In his words, the Browns didn't just miss on a draft pick. They chose chaos over clarity, dysfunction over development, and short-sighted panic over long-term planning. And he's not wrong. Let's start with the choice itself. Dillon Gabriel was never projected to be a top-tier quarterback coming out of college. While capable, his draft stock wasn't exactly lighting up war rooms. So when the Browns doubled down and stuck with him over someone like Shedeur Sanders, a player whose pedigree, performance, and presence scream franchise potential, it immediately raised eyebrows. For Incognito, though, it did more than that. It triggered a deep dive into everything that's been wrong with the Browns for years. He didn't just blame the pick. He blamed the process behind it. He said Cleveland's scouting and draft strategies feel more like a game show than a football operation. A wheel spin here, a Madden rating there. And somehow a major NFL franchise ends up making decisions that look more like glitches than strategies. And if that sounds harsh, well, that's because it is. But it's also not new. The Browns have built a reputation for burning through quarterbacks like old receipts. Every few seasons, it's a new rebuild, a new regime, a new name under center. And every time, the same result: disappointment, confusion, another promise broken. That's the cycle Incognito couldn't ignore, the endless loop of potential turn to chaos. He described the Browns' draft room as a daycare center, mocking the idea that anyone in charge actually knows what they're doing. He called out ownership. He questioned the coaching. He laughed at the front office. And it hit, not just because it was funny, but because it felt like the truth. Even the fans know it. Every year, the Browns launch some new PR-friendly narrative. They say the culture is changing. They talk about new systems, new standards, new visions. But Incognito pulled the curtain back and asked the obvious question: what's actually changing? Because from the outside, it looks like the same mistakes playing out in slow motion. And the worst part? They could have done it differently. Richie pointed to franchises that do have their act together: Kansas City, Baltimore, San Francisco. Teams that don't just draft talent, they develop it. They scout with precision, draft with purpose, and build around a clear identity. The Browns? They're still throwing darts in the dark and wondering why they keep missing. This wasn't just one bad pick. That's what makes this rant sting so much. It's about a culture of bad picks. It's about a system where decisions don't seem to follow any logic, and where leadership avoids accountability like it's a pass rush. According to Incognito, the Browns aren't failing because they're unlucky. They're failing because they're unorganized. He compared their quarterback evaluation process to flipping through Madden stats and making picks based on vibes. It sounds ridiculous, and that's exactly the point. The decision to ignore a dynamic talent like Shedeur Sanders and roll with Dillon Gabriel doesn't look like scouting. It looks like a coin toss gone wrong. Incognito also highlighted how other teams invest in quarterback development. They don't just pick a guy and hope. They build around him. They craft offenses to suit their skill set. They nurture leadership. The Browns, on the other hand, keep picking quarterbacks like lottery tickets. Scratch, pray, toss, repeat. And with every cycle, the damage piles up. Richie emphasized that this isn't just a front office problem. It's cultural. It's systemic. He said the Browns have created a team environment where instability is normal, where players are tossed into chaos and expected to succeed anyway. He painted a picture of a franchise that's rebuilding so often, it doesn't even remember what it's trying to build. He's not alone in this assessment either. Fans have turned their frustration into memes, their loyalty into dark humor. Cleveland games aren't just watched, they're experienced, like a long-running tragic sitcom with a rotating cast and no satisfying ending. And Incognito leaned into that. He said the Browns have become a kind of performance art, a team whose dysfunction is now so consistent, it's almost entertaining. Not in the way the NFL wants, but in the way train wrecks dominate timelines. His commentary quickly went viral for a reason. It wasn't just a rant. It was a voice echoing what fans, analysts, and former players have all been whispering for years, that the Browns aren't just making bad choices. They're built to make them. That's why the Shedeur Sanders snub hit so hard. Because it wasn't just a bad scouting decision, it was another opportunity fumbled by a team with a long history of fumbling everything. Incognito warned that unless there's a radical change in leadership, in philosophy, and in self-awareness, this isn't going to stop. Cleveland will keep spinning the same wheel. More wasted drafts. More quarterback busts. More chaos sold as strategy. He didn't say it for shock value. He said it because he's seen what real franchises do. And this ain't it. And now, the ball's in Cleveland's court. Will they prove him wrong? Will they finally show signs of a true vision? Or will this just be another off-season of noise followed by another season of excuses? Whatever happens next, one thing is clear, people are watching. Not just fans, not just media, but former players who aren't afraid to torch the place if it means finally holding someone accountable. So if you've had it with the Browns' front office circus, let it out in the comments. Do you think Richie nailed it? Should Shedeur have been the obvious pick? Are the Browns still pretending chaos is a game plan? Hit like if you've yelled at the screen during a Browns game. Subscribe for more breakdowns of the most jaw-dropping moments in sports drama, because as long as Cleveland keeps choosing chaos, you know we'll be here to talk about it. At this point, the Cleveland Browns don't just have a quarterback controversy. They have an identity crisis. And Richie Incognito ripped straight through the polite football talk and said what everyone else has been too careful, too PR-friendly, or too exhausted to say. The Browns are a franchise addicted to their own dysfunction. Dillon Gabriel over Shedeur Sanders wasn't just a questionable football decision. It was a symptom. A big, ugly red flag waving from the top of a franchise that still doesn't seem to understand how to get out of its own way. Let's be real, it takes a special kind of organizational confusion to look at a quarterback like Shedeur, a poised high IQ, composed field general with a football upbringing that's been under a microscope since high school, and say, nah, we're good. But the Browns did. And they did it proudly, like they just cracked some code no one else could see. Richie Incognito wasn't having it. He called it out for exactly what it is. Another Browns move that makes zero football sense and total Brown sense. Because that's the thing, there's a pattern here. It's not just the pick. It's how they picked. It's why they picked. It's who is making these decisions, and how often they've gotten it wrong before. Incognito drew a clear line between Cleveland and the teams that actually win. Not occasionally, not accidentally, but consistently. He pointed at Baltimore, a franchise that builds its roster with intention and supports its stars with a real system. He praised Kansas City, where coaching, scouting, and player development work together instead of spinning in opposite directions. He brought up San Francisco, A team that knows how to turn a late-round pick into a legitimate playoff QB because there's a structure in place that allows players to succeed. And then there's Cleveland, where structure goes to die. Richie didn't hold back. He said the Browns' draft process looks like a game of pin the tail on the quarterback, that their scouting department seems more committed to surprises than smart choices. That decision-making in that building doesn't follow logic, it follows impulse. And no matter how many times they crash and burn, they just keep lighting the same match. He's not wrong. This isn't a one-time mistake. This is the Browns continuing a decade-long pattern of misreading talent, ignoring development, and turning chaos into a business model. Because let's talk about that chaos. It's not an accident. It's not bad luck. It's institutional. It's systemic. It's what happens when a team has no real direction at the top. And Richie said it plainly. The ownership, the leadership, the coaching staff, it's all part of the problem. Every decision made under this regime is filtered through a fog of confusion, ego, and fear of accountability. And now here we are, again, watching the Browns choose a quarterback most evaluators had ranked far below the other options, just so they could stick to whatever flawed formula they're secretly following behind the scenes. A formula that, let's be honest, has never worked. Gabriel might be a good kid. He might work hard, say the right things, put his head down and grind. But that's not the issue. The issue is that Cleveland keeps mistaking safe for smart, that they continue to pass on upside because they don't know how to manage it, that they'd rather control the narrative than risk being wrong, even if it means staying mediocre forever. Incognito went in on that mentality. He said the Browns aren't looking for leaders, they're looking for placeholders. Quarterbacks they can blame when the house falls apart again. Players who won't ask questions. Picks that won't raise expectations. Because as long as expectations stay low, so does the pressure. It's not just cowardly, it's catastrophic. Because this team has talent. This team could compete. But as long as the people in charge are more worried about optics than outcomes, all that potential is going to keep rotting. And yes, fans know this. They've known it. That's why Richie's rant went viral. Not because it was shocking, but because it finally put words to the collective frustration that's been simmering in Cleveland for years. How many more draft busts before someone asks who's doing the scouting? How many more quarterback resets before someone admits the system is broken? How many more press conferences about rebuilding before someone notices that the house never gets past the foundation? The Browns keep calling it process. Richie called it what it is, a mess. And here's the part that really stings. They don't have to be this way. This isn't about being cursed. This isn't about Cleveland being doomed. It's about choices. The Browns choose to operate like this. They choose to stay stuck in patterns that never produce anything but frustration and memes. There are teams that lose and learn. The Browns just lose and repeat. Richie's frustration came from a place of experience. He's been in good locker rooms. He's seen what stability looks like. He knows what it takes to win. And when he looks at the Browns, all he sees is dysfunction being passed off as process. He mocked the idea that the Browns are building anything meaningful. Rebuilding chaos, he called it. That phrase stuck because it's the most accurate description of this team in years. They're not rebuilding in the traditional sense. They're just resetting the disaster button every season and hoping no one notices it's the same blueprint, just with a new face. And this time, that face is Dillon Gabriel, a quarterback who, fair or not, is now going to be the symbol of Cleveland's latest gamble. A gamble Richie and a lot of fans already see as doomed. It's not personal. It's structural. It's cultural. And unless something changes at the core of how this franchise thinks, it doesn't matter who's under center. Because no quarterback, not Shedeur Sanders, not Dillon Gabriel, not even prime Tom Brady, can fix a broken organization from the field. And that's what makes this more than just a funny rant. This is a warning, a plea, a final wake-up call to a team that keeps choosing the wrong road and acting confused when they end up in the same ditch. If the Browns want to be taken seriously, they need to act like a serious franchise. That means having a plan. That means making decisions based on logic and analysis, not impulse. That means putting players in a position to succeed instead of setting them up to fail. Until then, it's just more of the same. More rebuilds that lead nowhere. More quarterbacks thrown into the fire. More fans shaking their heads, wondering how a team with so many chances keeps blowing them. And if you think Richie Incognito was just venting for clicks or stirring the pot for attention, think again. Because this rant didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of years of built-up disbelief watching the Browns do the same thing over and over while expecting the NFL world to take them seriously. He didn't have to name every failed quarterback experiment. He didn't have to recite the revolving door of head coaches or GMs. We all know the history. It's written in every draft day meme, every halftime meltdown, and every time a promising rookie walks into Cleveland with big eyes and walks out months later looking like they just survived a natural disaster. What Incognito did was hold up a mirror, and the reflection wasn't flattering. Because when you choose Dillon Gabriel over Shedeur Sanders, after everything this franchise has been through, you're not just taking a risk. You're making a statement. You're telling the world that you either don't trust your own ability to develop real talent, or you don't know how to identify it in the first place. Richie called it out with brutal clarity. The Browns don't operate like a team that wants to win. They operate like a team that wants to survive criticism. There's a big difference. Survival means choosing the guy who's easier to manage, who won't demand a full scheme overhaul, who lets the coaching staff keep doing what they're doing without being challenged. But that's how you end up with a team full of maybe guys instead of real difference makers. Incognito wasn't just making jokes, he was diagnosing the disease. The Browns are trapped in a loop of reaction-based leadership. No long-term vision. No trust in bold decisions. Just a constant shuffle of short-term fixes dressed up as strategy. And this latest quarterback decision? It's more of the same. He talked about how real franchises, the ones that dominate, don't make decisions out of fear. They trust their scouts, build around their picks, and commit to an identity. They don't hedge every move. They don't keep one foot out the door before the guy even steps on the field. But that's exactly what Cleveland keeps doing. Gabriel isn't just a quarterback. He's the next placeholder. The next we'll see. The next in a long line of QBs handed the keys to a car with no wheels, no map, and a backseat full of angry fans. Incognito compared the Browns' decision-making process to spinning a wheel. And honestly, he's not wrong. There's no consistency, no evidence-based track record. Just one chaotic move after another, backed by press conference buzzwords and vague trust-the-process energy. And speaking of trust, how are the fans supposed to keep giving it? How do you convince people to keep buying in when the team keeps making choices that scream, "We're just guessing"? At some point, loyalty turns into fatigue. Hope turns into sarcasm. And the fans, the ones who've stuck around through all of it, stop expecting better. They start watching just to see what goes wrong next. That's not where a franchise should be. But that's exactly where the Browns are. A team that generates more headlines from draft night confusion and off-season chaos than from winning football. And Richie Incognito put it all out in the open. He didn't need stats. He didn't need a fancy telestrator breakdown. He needed one thing: truth. The raw, uncomfortable truth that this organization keeps making it harder than it has to be. Shedeur Sanders was available. A player with football IQ, charisma, pressure-tested performance, and star potential. Someone who could bring energy to a team desperate for a clear direction. But Cleveland said no. Not because they knew something no one else did, but because that's what they do. They choose chaos. Every time. And Incognito turned that choice into a warning. He said, plain and simple, that the Browns are risking their future. Not just because they passed on one player, but because they keep repeating the same logic that got them here in the first place. The same thinking that's led to years of wasted talent, fan frustration, and cultural instability. The kind of dysfunction that can't be masked with one good game. The kind that lingers, that infects every part of the organization, from the draft room to the locker room to the press box. And unless something changes, unless the people making the decisions finally admit that their way isn't working, Incognito says we're going to keep seeing the same story, different year, different name on the jersey, same ending. So here we are again. A quarterback battle that shouldn't even be a question. A fan base, once again, being asked to believe in a plan no one can actually explain. A team with talent, but no roadmap. And Richie? He's just the guy standing on the sidelines, yelling what everyone else is thinking. This doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't. It never has. But until the Browns stop pretending dysfunction is destiny, and start owning the fact that they are the problem, this carousel isn't stopping. It's just going to keep spinning faster, louder, and more ridiculous with every pass. If you're over it, drop a comment and sound off. Was Shadur the obvious pick? Is the Browns' front office officially out of excuses? Like if you've watched this team fumble another rebuild in real time. And hit subscribe so you don't miss the next disaster. Because with the Browns, you already know it's not a matter of if, it's when.